Hello, and welcome to Mr. America, the Bearded Truth, covering political and social issues one liberty at a time, with entertaining insights of current events and important discussions on topics that affect us all, shining the torch of liberty and brightening the future by bringing libertarianism into our everyday life. And now, your host, the friendly neighborhood libertarian, Jason Lyon, Mr. America, the Bearded Truth on Muddied Waters Media.
Oh, boys and girls, it's Saturday, but you somehow have the beard here. Who messed that up? Well, of course it was me. Welcome in, as I mess up my own settings. Welcome in, everybody. I'm glad that you guys are here for a weird, interesting Saturday day stream. I've got a hell of a guest today. Had a mishap happen, but I've got Sean Grahalva. Now, if you guys remember, we talked a little bit before about some veteran healthcare issues with Sean, so make sure you guys go back, check that one out. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about foreign policy. One of the things that really drove me to love this man was his in-depth knowledge, his principled stances on foreign policy, and his ability to dive through the muck to get the truth of what's going on, to understand it, and to see how things are going to play out. It's going to be a fantastic show. You guys are not going to want to miss this. But before we get there, of course, we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. So I first want to thank you guys, to each and every one of you, for being a part of today's show, for hopping in here, hanging out, for throwing us some likes, throwing us some heart reacts, reacting to each other's comments, for sharing this out with your friends and family, to put this in your Facebook groups, to put this anywhere and everywhere, so that this can get heard. Today, the big topic, of course, is going to be the Ukraine-Russia topic. Big shout out and thank you to Matt Wright and Spike Cohen for continuing to give me a platform to come out and talk to you guys. Now, if you guys saw on Facebook, my status here is in question, as I have over 15,000 unread emails, and that's just unacceptable by Muddy Water standards. So that may be getting revoked here soon. Big shout out and thank you to Brian Scott Lambrick and Jenny for the intro that we use on every episode of here on Mr. America, the Bearded Truth show. And of course, if you guys are listening to this live, but you guys want to find other places to do so, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Float, and Odyssey. There we go. But if you guys like to take us on the go wherever you're going, whether to the gym, out to the store, and you don't really have the opportunity to watch, you can find us on all your favorite podcast apps. We appreciate those 5-star reviews into helping spread the message of Muddied Waters. If you guys want to be a part of the exclusive content, an exclusive group getting the exclusive content, we just had an incredible, heartfelt Muddied Zoom this last Thursday. If you want to be a part of that, if you want to sit down with Spike Cohen, Matt Wright, and myself when I have the availability, you guys have got to get over to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters/subscribe. Click the link. $10 a month, that's all it's going to take, and you guys are going to have an incredible time with all of the different opportunities and all of the exclusive content that we'll continue to give you. You guys can head on over to muddywatersmedia.com/store. You can hook yourself up with some of the beautiful merch. I know my phone is always repping the Muddy Waters, and you can too. I want to give a big shout out and a thank you, of course, to Kelsey Lion Designs. As you guys are looking for taking your event, taking your company, taking your campaign to the next step, you guys need somebody like Kelsey Lyon. She is going out there changing the way that your company, your event, your campaign will be seen. She's going to make it an incredible operation. She's got the insights, she's got the market understood, and she's going to help you out. So make sure you guys head over to KelseyLionDesigns.com, use the code Muddied Waters. She's going to hook you up with a nice little discount, and I guarantee you're not going to regret that. Are you looking to get some knowledge? Are you looking to get some nugs of love? Well, head on over to nugofknowledge.com, use the code Bearded Truth. You guys are going to get 10% off, and you are not going to regret this one either. If you're looking to fly high and have a great time doing it, Nug of Knowledge is where you'll go. Sadly, because of the legalities, they can't talk about what's actually in their products and taking care of you. Damn you, government. But guarantee it's going to be better than your local supplier, and you won't have to worry about somebody getting caught on their skateboard. So head on over to nugofknowledge.com, use the code Bearded Truth, get 10% off, get the hookup in the mail, taking care of you. guys over there are fantastic people. Now, without further ado, let's hop in to the conversation today. I've got the one, the only Sean Grahalva, who has been an incredible person to me, both on an emotional level and on a friend level. He's been an educator of mine. He's somebody I've looked up to for years, and especially when it comes to the topic of foreign policy. So when the opportunity arose to talk about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, we had to jump all over it. So if you guys would welcome with me the one, the only Sean Grahalva. How's it going, bud?
Hey, bud, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. So I got you on a Saturday. I'm so glad we were able to work this out. Sorry
Glad to be here.
sorry for all of that, but
Oh, you're good.
the Russia Ukraine thing, that's something that you turn on the news because we're not really worried about monkeypox. We're not really worried about like the latest version of COVID. This is what's driving people to have these angry conversations on their Facebook feeds. So much disinformation has come out because it's been politicized in so many different angles. So I wanted to bring you on to hear what your thoughts are and to dive into this, because it's so incredibly important that we get somebody that's more unbiased, but somebody who's principled for what steps are being taken, how they should have been taken, and everything else. I'm going to open the floor for you. Have it away.
All right. So starting with the conflict in Ukraine, there was a whole lot of, to be really direct, BS messaging coming out of Russia, coming from the Kremlin about why they were doing this. There were talk of Nazis, which we'll get to here in a second. There was talk of Ukraine didn't have its own culture. But at the end of the day, Russia is in a really, really bad position, and they have been for a very, very long time. Also, when we're talking about countries, you have to remember that they have their own history that is very unique. It's very valid. So when we look at Russia, there is a long history of oppression from outsiders. And part of the Russian psyche is that, like, outside oppressors go and kill millions and millions of people and do absolutely horrific things to those people while they're occupying. This is something, if you look at the Central European plain, that's more or less like a highway, where anyone walking can more or less just walk their way from France all the way into Russia. In the case of Napoleon, in the case of like Genghis Khan, going even further back, even approaching from the east isn't really that bad. And historically, when these people come in and occupy Russia, horrific things happen. And that's something that we've really got to keep in mind. Russia, on the whole, has been acting out of a basis of fear, because there are very, very strong, what they view as enemies that are already on that plane. They're continuing to put, ICBMs, major effective forces, right on their doorstep. Even back in the 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had nukes in Turkey. And if Russia had nukes in Mexico or Canada, I think we would be pretty freaked out too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of that's...
I want to highlight something that you said there, because I think as an American, so many of us don't recognize that these are all countries over there that are landlocked together, that you can walk from one to another, right? So you live in Bama. I heard that potentially maybe some interfamily relationships there, but stepping away from that, I'm over here in South Carolina. For us to go to war, I mean, for me to be in South Carolina, to embolden myself to have a strong uprising of a military, it's not unusual for Alabama to go, all right, no more Roll Tide, we gotta roll something else, we gotta change things up. And that mindset there of just the proximity, we're not talking about traveling across the Pacific Ocean when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. They are talking about their next door neighbor. That it blows my mind how often I forget that,
Yeah.
despite talking about it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they literally share a border with each other. And while Russia is the largest country on the planet, something like what, 3 times the size of America, um, we're still talking about a very compact area where, last I looked, the majority of Russians live in the West, within missile range of these other countries that are now on their doorstep, allied, like have firm alliances with the people that historically have been oppressing them economically. But economic war is still a thing. It still hurts people. It still causes real human harm. Now, all of that said, I am not apologizing for Russia in any way, shape, or form. What they have
No.
done is absolutely inexcusable. There is no justification for it or anything like that. I just think that we do have to start from a place of, yeah, I'm going to say it, empathy, in order to understand why they are doing what they're doing. And, it's, we are looking at Russia and we're saying, okay, your behavior is out of line. This is going to sound really paternalistic or something like that. It's like, if you have kids, if you've had that kind of blessing in your life, um, if your child is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, you really need to stop and ask, okay, why are they motivated to do this
Yes.
thing? And what can I do to change the incentives or in order to behave their behavior? And that's really the view that we should be taking. Now, we're not the policemen of the world, nor should we ever be, but a lot of what Russia is saying and doing is really quite simple when you take out their own rhetoric out
Yeah.
of the mix. Because when you listen to the Kremlin, they're saying, well, they're Nazis in Ukraine. Okay, so there are military units in Ukraine. There are paramilitary units, militias that have used Nazi symbols. In that neck of the woods, that's not some foreign, scary concept. Those were real. There's still living memory in Ukraine, in Russia, that remembers the occupation of the Nazis.
Yeah.
We're talking about war crimes on a widespread scale of a very personal assault nature. And this was widely practiced.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the exact terminology. Maybe I've been hanging around too many trigger warning happy people here, but it's the reality is that, like, this is still a very real thing for them.
Yeah.
No different than, if you met someone or you knew somebody that was alive during the Great Depression, they are going to have a very visceral reaction to food insecurity, to housing insecurity, things like that. We, again, when we're thinking about what exactly is their motivation and how we can achieve behavior change, we have to consider that. And that is a large part of what is going on.
And
now,
I think
the flip side of the coin. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's also important because lately we've been on a really strong activist kick here on the show, and we've been talking about ways of effective communicating, of ways of working with people that maybe you didn't expect to. And one of those things is we talk about steel manning the argument, where you try to listen to the other side, you listen to where they come from, you understand where they're coming from, and then by being able to do that, you're first able to understand what they're doing, what they're trying to do, and you can then help them steer into a better direction. So as we say here and we wag our finger at Russia and say that wagging, as we point our finger at them, give them the knife hand, and we're like, no, this ain't happening, this ain't your ring, bud. we have to understand why it is that they're doing this, and that's one of the
Yeah.
big things that a lot of people don't want to talk about, because as you pointed out, there's a lot of things that have led up to this point, to today. And if we just operate as if this was happening in a vacuum, yeah, Putin looks like the worst, most execrable, the worst person ever, for just going and attacking. If we can quote the vice president of the United States, just because Russia's the big country and Ukraine's the small country and they're trying to take over, suddenly this looks.
Did you
like
really just channel Kamala on that?
I did. I had to, because it's just so juvenile in the way that she phrased it, and it shows like a lack of understanding on that. And so how do we just? Of course, people are like, no, we just gotta go beat up the big guy. We're the bigger guy than they are. We have a stronger military. We beat them out. They are number 2, but we're number 1. So number 1's got to take a number 2 on number 2. It's fine. So. But when we look at the thing in a holistic manner and we understand what led up to this point, we can see where America has been engaged in Ukraine, against Russia, in the area, in different proxy wars. We can see why this conflict is seen as beneficial for some of the warmongers, even in the American soil, for us to get engaged on this. But we don't want to have that conversation there, and that's why I'm so incredibly happy to have you on, so we can have some of this historical context there as well. But I jumped in and I interjected, but I want you to continue though.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, and I really like the conversation around, like, how do you engage with people that you otherwise normally would be battling. This past week I was at a big organization-wide meeting, and I heard a line that really stuck with me. Anyone that has been around me knows that, I tend to carry around some sort of like writing pad and pen at all times, because sometimes you just get these ideas or hear these things that it's like you got to write them out. And I believe it is a paraphrase from Abraham Lincoln, and it goes from, if I make my enemy my friend, have I still not defeated them?
Ooh.
We're going to let that one hang for a second.
Ooh.
Because that is a lot.
Yeah.
There is a deep, deep well in there of insight. And, it's really spicy when you really start digging into it. That should have been our objective from like a US foreign policy standpoint. That should have been our objective on so many issues, on so many conflicts over time. But especially right now, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about Ukraine, especially right now.
Yeah.
There was a moment in the 90s where Russia was contemplating joining NATO, where, they were really, really working towards joining like the West as a whole. Now, I don't know exactly what happened. Honestly, I've had a lot going on, so I haven't had time to go and look into that further. Maybe it's something that one of your listeners can do. But, when we look at that kind of history and take a look at that quote, that could solve so many of our foreign policy issues.
Yeah, and also on that note, of helping in foreign issues, I think it was Rothbard that was talking about, you can either send troops or you can send trade. Like, if nobody wants to have, and speaking to the previous president, where we use war, or we use trade as a war function in order to the tariff wars. But if you have that trade, nobody wants to lose that trade. Nobody likes to make their people suffer. Nobody likes to see their people pay more in taxes. Some people will just blame,
well, I don't know about taxes.
Okay, no, well,
some people like,
yeah, but everyone likes to point to the suffering that people pay, and they go, well, we just have to step in and do more on that. And so, the opportunities have arisen in the past of being able to engage in productive trade with one another,
Yeah.
and we've missed so many of those opportunities as well. But
And I'll tell you, years ago at work, I had the great opportunity of working on like a big foreign policy course.
Mhm.
Um, Me and I don't.
Uh-oh, just lost you for a second. Try say something. Nope. Nope. It's gonna pop up in a second, but so it always pops up and says, "There we go. You should be good now."
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, if you've never had Dan Johnson on your show, he is absolutely incredible. This guy, he is a young guy. He is on fire. He is going to go and do some amazing, amazing things. I'm very happy and proud to call him a friend of mine. And when he first joined the organization that I work for, um, like one of the first projects that we got was I I was kind of given the lead on it, and Dan was working for me. As his life is changing and all that, currently I actually report to him, which has been like the greatest growth opportunity for me because I've learned so much from him. But one of the things that we ended up teaching was this idea of a stoplight for foreign policy, where the green is trade, yellow is diplomacy, and red is war.
Hmm.
Very, very simple. Green means go, trade all you want. Yellow is diplomacy. I mean, we're talking about, agreements, international organizations, foreign aid, things like that. And then red is when we're talking about full blown war.
Okay.
Um, and that's a really, really great, I guess, frame of mind, paradigm to look at foreign policy, because it's something that like your average liberty minded or anti-collectivist person looks at it and they're like, well, there's nothing that I can do. Well, there are some things that we can do, you know when we're looking at like the green light under trade. That's where most human beings individually can do the most possible, because we're talking about like breaking barriers for other people. We're talking about empowering them, if that's giving funds to them like Live Aid and stuff like that that we've done historically in the US over the years, or if that's just literally buying their products. I will once upon a time, not that long ago, I used to go on these long rucks
Yeah.
during the beginning year of COVID, where wear like a weighted plate vest, um, and I always love a good sticker or patch or something like that. And there's this company in Germany that started doing a series of patches that would benefit Ukraine. So they would only take the bare minimum for them to essentially clear that batch of patches, and they would send the rest of the money to Ukrainian organizations and stuff like that. That's a great example, because not only are we benefiting Germany in that case, the money is going to the strongest ally in that area, um, but also they are taking all the extra profits from it and they're sending it to directly to the people that need the help the most. um, and then once we get into yellow, it starts getting less and less of what individual people can do. But as we try to push the stoplight back to green,
Mm-hmm.
we can still give and buy and model our values and send aid and things like that on an individual level.
Yeah.
um and I could go in depth on all that, but getting back to Russia and Ukraine, for everything that the Kremlin said leading up to the war, what it was really about and what has been proven is that this is all about warm water port access. Now, in America, this is not a problem of ours. Like, to my knowledge, I don't think that there are any ports in America that are cold weather ports. And what a cold weather port is in the wintertime, the port literally freezes over. That is why Russia has so many icebreakers. That is why, that is such a big deal to them. Otherwise, everything that they trade has to go overland. And now you're talking about, you know, very expensive. You're talking a lot of personnel to move a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's very heavy, lots of fuel in the process. It's an expensive way to trade. But if you can float the items, obviously your cost goes down, your people are able to prosper more. That is fundamentally what this has always been about. And they have shown that over the last 2 months. And I sent you a couple maps. If you pull up the one that's interactive.
I can. Here we go. Oh no, wrong screen. Whoop, there we go. Yep. Oh. Chat, can you still hear him real quick? I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Hold on. Doop, 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 doop. Copy. Sorry about that. All right, you're good to go. Sorry about that. So, down along this coast.
So you can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So fundamentally, their real drive here was always to secure a warm weather port. Now, when we're looking at like Mariupol, Berdyansk, places like that, they are not fully warm weather ports. They still do freeze in the winter for a time, but they are not 365 days a year warm weather ports. Those were secured around Sevastopol, in the Crimea Peninsula area back in 2014. The real problem is, okay, now they had a warm weather port, but how do you get your goods there? So what has shown up over time is that they were trying to create a land bridge from Russian territory all the way down into Sevastopol. So yeah, starting right in that area that is now fully supported by Russian troops, down that highway that goes through Mariupol and Berdyansk, and then over into, I do not know how to pronounce that one, Melitopol, and into Crimea. That was always their number one priority. They did try to take Kyiv. The Ukrainians handled themselves incredibly well. Whether it was IT guys in ATVs, literally zeroing in, partisans along the way that were flooding roads so that the Russians would have to air down their tires to get out, and their low quality of Chinese tires that they were running blowing out. Thankfully, Kyiv was defended and did not fall. But this was always the real thing that was going on here. And on that map there, this map is an interactive. It may be a little bit delayed, but these are the official locations of Russian military forces. Now, think of this as like headquarters or battalion commands, things like that. I did send Jason a few more that show a little bit more active detail, but we're not going to go there quite yet.
Okay.
You can see obviously a very heavy presence right around Donetsk in that southeast corner. Yep, right there. And then you also see forces in the west in Moldova. In this more, keep going. Yeah, right
You talk
there.
about these right here. Where is
Yep,
that? Here's Pole. Okay.
Moldova. Yep. So when you're, if you think about priorities, their number one priority was always secure a warm weather port. Their number two priority is this more cultural idea. Now, again, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of Russia. The fall of the Soviet Union really and truly was a humanitarian crisis. People were starving to death. People were freezing to death. Gangs were running huge swaths. Organized crime was running huge swaths of the country. Individual rights did not exist in those swaths. They did eventually come back around and reassert order, but their country fell apart from the Russian perspective. Again, I'm not excusing any of this. I believe that Ukraine has its own very vibrant culture. I think that's fairly obvious, as with Belarus and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia and all these other countries that were former Soviet satellite states. But there were still Russians that were essentially stranded in foreign countries. Now, I don't know what to tell them. There are absolutely grudge matches, that have played out in Ukraine where you do have militias that are executing and committing other atrocities, publicly executing and publicly committing other atrocities against Russians. Like that stuff is real. That stuff did happen. Those units did use Nazi symbolism. The flip side of the coin is, Putin's favorite mercenary company, or contractor company, I believe the owner or the leader of that organization literally has SS, collar tattoos on his neck. He has like Nazi symbols tattooed on his body. These are not questionable ones. They're not like, oh, well, maybe, he just didn't understand the significance. No, these were real, serious, like Nazi symbolism.
So what
So
you're saying is it's not okay for thee, but it's okay for me. It's kind of a weird stance, but
it is,
government.
and it's especially weird when you're talking about white supremacists versus white supremacists because they're the wrong kind of white. I mean, it gets weird fast.
Yeah.
But when we break it down to material issues, their number one priority, they've got to have a warm weather port that they can trade out of, and their people are stranded in foreign countries, and those countries used to be part of Russia. It's a hard position, but this is not the way. If you want to bring those people home, bring them home. This is why we need people to be able to travel. I'm not sure if there are any restrictions against them traveling or something like that, but if you want to be part of Russia and you're living in Moldova or Ukraine, like I got nothing for you. Like,
Yeah.
maybe scoot, you know.
It's such a struggle in all of this because there's so much of that it's just like when we look at it from the American perspective and we try to understand all these things, there are so many things that we want to do and there's nothing that we can do on those fronts. We can't re-envision how history was, and many people have tried. We can't act like history didn't happen and just say it's big country versus a little country. Deep thoughts with Kamala. If you guys missed out on Muddy Waters, a Freedom Tuesday night, that's a new segment, so make sure you guys tune in for that. But there's so much of this that people want to know. I guess from this is we can of course dive into. We could spend days talking about what's going on. So right now kind of, if you could give us like a 30-second, minute long update as to where we're at, and then I want to know if you got a couple bullet points for us for what we should be doing as American citizens, what our government should be doing, are they taking the right steps, where are they stepping wrong, etc.
Yeah. So, and this is something that I have personally not had the bandwidth to go and research and, really get out there and be a good example on. But if you really want to help, buy Ukrainian products. That is the easiest, that is the best thing, where there is mutual benefit, where you're not just giving out of your pocket, you are getting something in return. And honestly, that's the easiest thing that anyone can do. The hard part is, how do you find these Ukrainian products? Like, where do you buy this stuff? How do you ensure that it's actually from Ukraine? Things like that. At the end of the day, do some research on your own. Look into this stuff. I know a lot of people are very wary of TikTok for good reasons regarding, the Chinese Communist Party. But I'll tell you, the amount of information that you can find on TikTok from people that know what they're talking about and bring receipts is mind blowing.
Yeah.
So, it's been obvious that this war was going to happen for 8 years. This is not anything new. This has been building up for a very long time. There are a lot of people that have trained Ukrainians, have been there, not necessarily in the fight, but training those that were. You can always reach out and listen to what they're saying on TikTok. And there are a lot of people that are going very, very in depth. So that's something that, if you want to know more, get out there and do your research. It's shockingly easy right now.
It's amazing. Because I used to be a loud critic of Q because, well, I mean, it was a giant conspiracy, and kind of everyone who didn't buy into the Kool-Aid saw that as such. But one of the things that the following did was, they were like, he gave us the blueprints to do our own research. And I was like, you got psyoped. It's fine. But that right there is, going onto TikTok, going onto social media and finding people, and then trying to find other sources that can verify what you're reading. This is the best way forward. Practice your discernment skills. Does it make sense? Look at the history of things. Do all, as much as we want to just claim world leaders are just deranged and they don't have a clue as to what they're doing. I mean, they all can't be Joe Biden. So they all
Nice.
So there are going to be opportunities where it is a cognitive disability to have somebody in power. They're going to flail about. We have reports coming out that Putin is sick, and so if he's dying,
Which he is.
If he's dying, the best thing that he could do, of course, is to start up a huge world war, because that's just in his country's interest. It's like, there's so much more to this, and we have to take the time to dive into this to understand. If oftentimes we like to take unrelated matters and smash them together and make sure that we've got this blueprint back here of this map, and we got the little thumbtacks and the string, and we're standing there smoking 16 non-menthol cigarettes, because that would be bad. Just looking like a crazy conspiracy theory. It's like, Putin can be sick. It doesn't mean that he's like, just like, fuck it, if I'm gonna die, I'm take the world down with me. There could be a lot more to this, and that's why I'm like so glad that I had you on for this. Because there is so much more to this. There is, those trade routes are massive. If you are cut off and isolated, and right now you've got the Kremlin coming out and pushing numbers to make the ruble be more valuable, if you will, to the US dollar, and it's like, but they can't trade it anywhere. So it's kind of
Yeah.
worthless on the world market, sure. So whatever they value it at, if Venezuela
Mhm.
came out for a while and was like, our money's worth billions, it's like, yeah, you went through like 1 trillion% inflation in a year. Like nobody cares. Like for those gamers out there, World of Warcraft gold at one point was worth more than a Venezuelan currency. Like a video game's virtual currency was worth more. Nobody cares
That's
what you sell.
insane.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so we have a lot of stuff to discern in this. Doing like what you've done, go to the sources, find out. I'm gonna grab this link for you guys. The Rondelli Foundation. I'm gonna put that link in the description for the show notes so you guys can get that. I do have a question for you before we get to my final question for you.
Yeah.
From the chat. John Connor asked, speaking truths, you guys appreciate that. Is our intervention warranted and justifiable from the government's perspective? He says, I cannot even keep straight how many billions. We were allies in World War II and have fought ghost wars with them ever since. Is the government warranted, justified in what they've been doing for the money they've been sending and any other actions that you've seen?
I believe that the government's role is to um, first and foremost is to secure individual rights. I think that is pretty much the entire job description. We're well past that. We've been well past that for
Since the 1800s.
200 years at this point. Like, you know, I would love to see a reality where it is truly limited, small government. They stick to their wheelhouse and all of that. But in the meantime, I'm going to engage in reality instead of the fantasy that I wish I were living in. And, it's unfortunate that they are continuing to do stuff like this with so much of our money. It is causing real problems at home. There is literally a baby food shortage. Like, this is a problem. This is a real problem. This is something that is actually more in their wheelhouse than sending $40 billion worth of military equipment to Ukraine. Um, at the end of the day, the word intervention, I think, is a very specific word. So when we're looking at it, we don't have troops in active combat. We are avoiding that with every single thing that we can, for very good reasons. JFK's number one fear was that a nuclear equipped country, when faced with either launching nukes or a humiliating retreat and defeat, his biggest concern is that they would say, all right, you know what, let's do this thing. I'll take everyone out with me. um it, I don't see how at this point or any point going forward how Russia can realistically like rehab themselves in the next 10 years as a result of this. And one thing that's a very, very, very real reality for Russia is they have a population bomb problem. And it is going off right now. When you look at the numbers and how they recruit into their military, which is to say conscript, um, you know, this was the last year that they could have done this. There was such a reduction in births in the wake of the Soviet state dissolving, that this was like their last chance.
So they're Hail Mary.
That this is it. This is kind of like their last best hope for securing like a reality that is profitable for their people, that is sustainable for their people, where millions won't be dying of starvation. So that, I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I will tell you that millions would have died had they taken Kyiv, had they broken through, had they overtaken the country, because their next step would have been to invade Moldova, as you can see by that militia that was on the map. what's the name? The operational group of Russian forces in the Transnistria region of the Republic of Moldova. That was very clearly their next step, was distract everyone with invading Kyiv, go for the throat, and then in the meantime, build up the land bridge from Russia to Crimea, then extend that all the way into Moldova. And the rest they were just going to choke out over time. At this point, shoulda, woulda, coulda, it is what it is. That's something that we can't control. It may be something that we're very concerned about. It's a bad situation for everyone.
It is.
It's a bad situation for everyone.
I wish that, we had more principled people when it comes to our foreign policy and how we conduct ourselves, and had cooler heads on this conversation, and try to use diplomacy and other means and other ways. Because you point out such a concern, right? And I always considered it, and I saw a terrible meme from a libertarian fringe group where Ukraine was Mother Bear and was
surprised.
Yeah. But it portrayed Ukraine as like a mother bear in hibernation, and Russia's coming up, and it was just like, or no, Russia was the mother bear just hibernating like peacefully, and then you had Ukraine coming up and prodding with a stick, and it was just like, that's not it at all. Like, there is so much to this in talking about people, talking about a way forward for people. When we talk about American economics, right now we're potentially on the cusp of a pretty big economic downturn based on a lot of different interactions, and how those play out is going to determine on if it's bad, if it's terrible, or where we fall on that. Russia is talking about surviving, and the mindset there of somebody who's trying to corral its people into supporting him, to continuing to support him, who has had to use military forces in the past, has had to do some pretty downright dreadful tactics in order to maintain support. This isn't something that he's going to take lightly. It's interesting that, when we saw him stand on the world stage and said, I'm willing to use mutual destruction if we have to, and people went, he's just a crazy madman. It's like, we have to have that understanding. We don't have to agree, but we have to at least understand where people are coming from, why they're doing what they're doing, and then that way you can either leverage that for them or leverage that against them, depending on how you want things to play out. You can use these things, and it's disheartening to see. I feel like there's a public facing from our government of what's being said to the people versus what's actually being accomplished. And certainly, right, propaganda is a big thing when it comes to every conflict, every war. You have to be able to discern through that. So don't just trust, well, Joe Biden and Kamala said this, so therefore it's the real deal. Holyfield. There's so much to this, and I know that you're limited on time today, but I want to give you the last opportunity if you wanted to throw any last bit of information here on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, any last big, you want to leave a cliffhanger for everybody. I want to give it for you.
Well, I'll tell you, if you do have folks that want to hear more, let's set up another interview. Let's go into depth. There is so much to unpack from all this, from Russia being the greatest, most convincing paper tiger in the history of the world, to digging into who's right and who's wrong, which, spoiler, it's not that clear cut. We can definitely do that. I think that this situation is a lot more complex than anyone in like mass media is giving it credit for. They're trying to break this down into good guys versus bad guys, like they do. But what we've seen over time, especially as the internet continues to advance and people have more of a platform to speak their mind, their perspective, give their information, we have seen that it's never that clear cut. And this is a situation, again, where it's not that clear cut.
Yeah, absolutely. The muddiness, if I can use that, the muddiness of this, it's incredible. So I appreciate you, Sean, for taking some time on your Saturday to give me some of your weekend. I appreciate
Yeah,
that so much, man. And
absolutely, buddy.
I want to thank you, and I look forward to having that conversation. If you guys are in the chat, make sure you guys put a 1 in the chat. If you guys want to hear more, I can bend Sean's ear, and we can dive deeper into this here soon. But while we wait for that, Sean, I want to thank you so much for hopping on, man. I'll talk to you here in a little bit. Oh, you're muted again. Oh no, my internet went out. It's good. All right, man. I love you. Oh, there we go. I'll talk to you in a little bit. Appreciate it
Sounds good.
once again. All right. There's so much to this conversation. Of course, we couldn't do it in 1 hour. Of course, we couldn't sit down and just hammer all these details out and get it to you guys in one simple package, because we're talking about years of history, years of conflicts, and not just years, but decades of conflicts, decades of repressed feelings and turmoil, and understanding the politics inside Ukraine, inside Russia, inside NATO, inside America, inside all these different figures. But I hope that through the muddiness of what we were able to give you guys today, and talking about a lot of the different aspects that are not being discussed in your mainstream news, on your Facebook feeds, in your Twitter feeds, wherever you guys are hanging out in the social media world, that you're able to see that things are not even as clear as what a lot of people are trying to portray this to be. And so if we want to be effective in the actions that we take, if we want to be good and wholesome in every step that we take pushing forward, we have to understand from the beginning. And I know that through the activism discussions we've been having in the past, of being able to work with people means that you have to understand where they're coming from. This is important when it comes to a national level, when it comes to a state level, country level, whatever level, down to individual. Every level, this has to be a tool that is effective to be used, if we want to be effective in what we're doing, and stopping wars, and creating trade of mutual benefit. These are all things that we have to have, these effective communications, and that means that we have to have effective understanding of each other. Of course, we've discussed this a little bit here. I'm looking forward to future discussions on this as well, in other foreign wars, as I'll be sitting here on the sidelines, of course, screaming and shaking my fist at the heavens, of the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people get killed from these efforts. So, but with that, guys, I'm gonna wrap things up. I'm gonna see you guys next week, next Friday. We've got a show. Next Friday is the Libertarian Party National Convention. Next Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Let me know if you guys want me to cover it on Friday and cover kind of my thoughts on the current state of the LP. I'd be happy to cover that. If not, we can grab somebody and discuss some other good practices that we could do as activists, or maybe even dive into some qualified immunity. I think that's on the top of my brain lately. But next Tuesday, make sure you guys tune in for Mighty Waters of Freedom. Spike and Matt, it's gonna be a fantastic show, 8 p.m. ish Eastern. And then Wednesday, there is no more My Fellow Americans. That is being suspended for a little while. Spike's going to get some work done and take things and bring it back to us. Thursday night, Writer's Block with Matt Wright. You're not going to want to miss that. And then Friday, I'll be back here, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on time that time. I promise you guys. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of it. I will see you guys soon. I love you.